want to share with you a big idea today that forests and trees have a great opportunity to offset a huge amount of carbon, and we've got to take much better advantage of it than we are. And that requires everybody to get engaged. So I like to hike and bike in the woods. I have done all my life. And in 1993, I bought a cabin up in the mountains, and it was threatened by wildfire right away. Nearly didn't even get to move in because we got evacuated from town. But fortunately, the fires got put out, and I learned about brush clearance and raking and burning the slash in a burn pile when it was safe, and the importance of fighting fire with fire. It was kind of a big deal. But I lived in the Bay Area, and I always thought that fires were a thing in the mountains and in the urban communities were safe. Until 2020, when, of course, we had big fires east and west of the Bay Area of Silicon Valley. We had 400,000 acres burned. It was just cataclysmic. Many of you remember these photos in the newspaper of San Francisco disappearing into an apocalyptic haze. It's just unbelievable. It's getting worse fast. Some of you may notice a doubling of acres burned every 2 years. That matches Moore's law. If you extrapolate forwards, the entire state of California is on fire and burned out in 2030. That's not a good thing. That set of fires generated about 100 million tons of carbon dioxide. And that was only 5% of the wood being released in carbon. The rest of it will decay over the next 20 years, 2 gigatons just from that 1 year of fire. Okay, it's easy to blame climate change. Extended drought leads to stressed trees, which are more likely to burn. Bark beetles are no longer killed by cold winters. The quenching rain comes later in the year. It's a big problem. In fact, wildfires contribute significantly to climate change too. Worldwide, about almost 2 gigatons, 2 billion tons of carbon emitted from wildfires. That's more than Germany. That's a big number. The problem, though, is so you've got a positive feedback loop. The problem here is that it's not climate change causing it. It's actually human mismanagement that's the problem. We've been clear-cutting our forests since the gold rush, when we cleared them to burn and to make flumes and things. And all the trees have grown up the same age, way too dense. Most importantly, we've suppressed fire for about 100 years. And the fire that normally sweeps through the forest and cleans out the litter and the brush has been suppressed, so now the forests are dangerously overloaded and ready to erupt in catastrophic fire that then destroys the timber and doesn't come back again afterwards. So when we wander through those forests, this is close to where my still standing cabin is, we see that all the trees are scarred by fire. In fact, these giant sequoia trees can live for 1,000 years. They've probably seen 100 incidents of fire, of low-intensity cleansing fire that sweeps through in a natural way. Biologists call these forests fire-adapted temperate forests because they need fire to survive. But we've suppressed fire, and so now they've become a catastrophic source, and they're degrading and emitting lots of carbon. So what do we get to do about it? Well, the strategy is clear. We have to thin the trees. We have to reintroduce prescribed fire to clean out the litter and the brush. And then this chart here shows the impact of that. In the back of the chart is an area of forest in the fires this 22 season where the forest wasn't treated. And the forest has been raised to black in most areas. It may not recover. Tremendous loss of life and carbon there. In the middle was the optimal solution. It's been thinned. Prescribed fire has swept through it. And the fire came through the area, and a week or two later, you can barely tell because it stayed low under the canopy, did not destroy the trees, just burned out a few leaves and needles. And in the front is what happens if you thin only and don't reintroduce prescribed fire. This forest will definitely survive. So the strategy, what we need to do is very clear. And we've got to do it fast and quickly. We've got to do 50 gigatons a year. The opportunity here is significant. Let me contrast it with the kinds of stuff that people often talk about. We can wait for technology to deliver us incremental solutions. This is 4 million Tesla's carbon contribution. In fact, I had to enlarge it to make it even show up as a single pixel on the chart. If we made Tesla 100 times bigger, it would just barely show up as an impact compared to the 50 million the 50 billion tons that we've got to pull down every year. So that's not going to help. Forests pull down about 16 billion tons of carbon every year worldwide. That's a big number. Unfortunately, we lose half of that. We lose 8 billion tons in wildfire and logging every year. And the opportunity here is to diminish that 8 billion tons and recover 4 billion tons of sequestration. That makes a big down payment on the 50 that we have to achieve overall. Maybe one of the biggest we'll hear about today. So in 2020, while those fires were putting the orange haze over San Francisco, I got to reacquaint with Alison Koch, who was actually with me at Netflix for a while, along with Guy Bays from Lyft and Scott Conway at the US Forest Service. And we co-founded Vibrant Planet with intent to solve some of this problem and move carbon sequestration through fire-resilient forests forwards more quickly. 4 key issues: understanding. We now know what to do. I've shown you that. Planning, knowing where and how to intervene in order to get the biggest impact. Funding to make it happen, and then just getting it done. So our first product was Land Tender, which is a planning tool. The key idea here is that using satellite data, we can accumulate the data sets necessary, build the tree-level models to do accurate planning. And then using modern technology, we can run cloud-based models in order to determine where is the most effective way and place to intervene. Then we can create different scenarios. The typical planning situation takes years, months or years to accomplish, because humans have to pull the data, have to run the models manually, and then have to argue about, do I care about spotted owls or fire resilience? And there's arm twisting and what have you. Our tool lets people put together a lot of different scenarios, compare them, find what's common, and get moving in weeks instead of months. The second problem is, how do we fund this activity? And the good news is that there's a chunk of money coming from federal and state governments, but it's not enough. The big idea here is that the carbon that we save in those forests can be used to generate carbon credits that get sold to emitters who cannot offset their core emissions through renewables, but need to offset it with carbon. And those credits can generate a lot of value that helps to fund the work to make the forest fire resilient. So this tool will take a project area, the area in blue, automatically find baseline areas of similar terrain, the areas in red, and use that to calculate dynamic baseline in order to figure out how much carbon is being saved by the treatment and management of the project area in blue. We're using a brand new fire-adapted methodology that's actually in public discussion with Vera this week. We expect that to be approved shortly. Be able to move ahead with that pretty soon. The good news here is that the voluntary credit market is growing very rapidly. That's about 400 million tons. Now, if I showed you this chart extrapolated out to the 20 billion tons that we need to be sequestering in order to meet the net zero commitments of all the companies who've made ESG commitments to the future, you would see a massive expansion here. The price of these improved forest management credits is about $10 a ton today. I think it's only going to go up from there given the demand that has to happen. If it were $50 a ton, which incidentally would represent about 10% of the cost of energy, if layered on top of gasoline, layered on top of electricity, so it's reasonably affordable, it would make a big, big difference. The key technology piece that we bring to this is the idea that you can use machine-learned interpretation of satellite photographs to quantify the carbon on the ground and come up with a much more robust model of the carbon that you've got in the baseline areas and that you're saving in the project areas. And you can use that to make trustworthy, dependable certificates that people can buy with confidence. I've talked a lot about fire-adapted forests, the forests all up down the west coast and actually extending further onto the east side. But of course, rainforests are another big area. There's actually more carbon sequestered in the temperate forest than in the rainforest, but the rainforests being destroyed faster. The problem here is it's not wildfire in the same way. It's human activity here. It's logging the rainforests to grow soy and to grow beef. which of course have methane, as we just learned as well. So let's look at the economics here. An acre of rainforest holds about 100 tons of carbon, about 360 tons of carbon dioxide. 1 acre cleared would grow about $350 worth of soy, or about $1,250 worth of beef. That means the implied price of carbon in that woods is about $10 to $30, depending what you would be doing with the woods if you cleared it. So the observation here, the big idea is the value of the carbon credit could be worth more than the soy or the beef that people would grow there. And if we had a reliable and robust way to measure and quantify that and turn that into credits that people could trust, then we could incent those landowners, those indigenous people, not to log the rainforests and to steward them and shepherd them as sequesters of carbon instead. And that would be really a big deal. So between fire-adapted temperate forests and preventing wildfire and incenting behavior in the rainforests, there's an opportunity here to save 2 gigatons on both sides. And that makes a real big action here. So we've got a huge opportunity in front of us. I talked about the planning. I talked about the financing through carbon credits. Now it's getting it done. And so my ask to you is lobby, support, engage with your governments, your state governments, the agencies that are responsible for managing the forests where you live or work or play, and encourage them to do what's necessary to save those forests, save them from fire, save them from logging in a way that will support our planet forward into the future. So thanks very much.